Yeah, I mean, I think there always is, like, when you are entering a predominantly white space, you don't really know how you're going to be seen, how you're going to be accepted, what insecurities it might draw out.
USC is a school based on a sense of community.
A community shared between students, faculty, staff, and even the surrounding neighborhood.
With a wide variety of guests, from professionals to students, Behind the Scenes at SC is a safe place for discussing and learning about issues that directly impact USC students.
Made by students for students.
And anyone else who's curious. We hope you take something valuable away from these episodes, just as we did by making them.
Thank you for listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Behind the Scenes. On this episode, we are going to be focusing on the intersection of race and diversity here at USC's Greek Life. I am so excited to welcome our two guests here with us today, Arianne and Caroline. They are both really good friends of mine, and we all met at the sorority 80 Pi here at USC. So obviously, this episode focuses on Greek life. So Arianne, could you give an outsider a little rundown of what Greek life is and what it entails here at USC?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, I guess it's a little different depending on where you are.
Yeah.
I guess at USC, Greek life is composed of 9 sorority chapters, I think like 15 fraternity chapters. Yeah. And that is more what we historically what Greek life. There's also the National Panhellenic Council, there's the Multicultural Council, there's the Asian Interfraternity Council. So there's actually like 5 different councils at USC. And 3 of those are more like culturally based organizations. But I guess the Greek life that we're talking about today is more sorority and like traditionally white sorority and fraternity life.
Would you mind going into a little bit about the history of Greek life?
Yeah, sure. So I think we touched about this. So like Panhellenic Greek life specifically and IFC2 is traditionally white. And I think you have to be like white, Catholic, Christian women to be able to join. So there wasn't like any Jewish people, wasn't any Black, Asian people. And that's really what prompted like these other like Greek councils to form to allow like expand that like community to other people who weren't like getting those opportunities.
In addition, when I was rushing, I know they had a lot of smaller rules like straightening your hair. Do you think these little expectations had an impact on your rush experience?
I mean, I personally think I have. At least, I'm pretty sure in our house we like changed the language of a lot of the things. Like instead of saying like nude shoes when we're talking about like a beige color, like we kind of changed that around. Oh, like inclusive of all skin types, inclusive of all hair types. Like I used to straighten my hair a lot growing up, but I do not do that anymore. So I know if I was told to straighten my hair, I simply wouldn't, and I would have been fine getting in trouble for that if that was the case.
Do you think there's any like major aspects that perpetuate the primarily white demographic? Like what's the major problem that you guys think comes to like getting girls of like women of color to rush?
I think definitely fees and kind of like the historical discourse around Greek life. I know like usually when I like try to go into things, I'll see if like, oh, like is there someone who like a woman of color or some person of color who can tell me a little bit more about their experiences specifically like in Greek life or something, so I can learn more about that. Other than that, I do think the fees are a really big thing, and it's stopping a lot of people who like don't have the like extra like lots of money to spare. Yeah,
more
for it.
3 semester.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think our sorority right now is almost $3,000 if you're not living in the house, and added on, so like the average I would say is about like $2,500 if you're not living in the house for all the chapters. And so there's also a lot of added expenses though. So like whether that be things like buying a dress to these things we call invites, which are like these like large events that we have. I explain like I guess like grown up prom with a theme.
Like imagine homecoming with like 21-year-olds.
Yeah, like homecoming with alcohol, and then also without alcohol if you're not 21, of course.
I did not even think about that. But
that's the way I describe it. And so I think there's a lot of pressure to like buy a new dress for this, and then there's like initiation where you're like expected to wear this like big white dress, which is like genuinely a wedding dress. And then things like Big Little, where you're expected to buy all these gifts for your like little sister and costumes. And so that's a conversation we were having this week of like, why do some houses expect so much from their members during Big Little Week, and like girls are spending upwards of like $1,000, whereas I know, for example, our house, we like literally just like don't really do that. It's like not that much is expected from us, which is nice. But I think there's a lot of added pressure.
If you could say like one thing to a person of color that wanted to rush but was worried about it because of everything that we talked about, what would you say?
I think somehow we need to shift the narrative that it's not really the house interviewing the P&M, but I think it should be seen as the P&M interviewing the house. Because at the end of the day, like, you'd be fine without being in a house, but the house needs members. Like, they need you there. So, like, ask the questions you want to be in the house that you feel like you would best fit in, best be a part of, and that you, like, best align yourself with. And if you don't find that house, then that's okay.
Come into Rush thinking I should be able to ask every single member within a house what their diversity, equity, and inclusion like initiatives look like. Honestly, if you have a weird experience, reach out to Panhellenic, because we really, really care about making this an equitable community. And at the end of the day, it's not going to affect your Rush experience. What it's going to be is it's going to be a learning experience for that member. And like, just like reach out to us and, you know, kind of come in with an open mind, but also like, if you see something, say something. If you feel uncomfortable, like, please tell us, because very much like the people who are running this show are a lot of people of color, first of all, and second of all people that care about these initiatives. So
Do you guys know a lot about Abolish Greek Life?
I kind of been thankful for them. I'm like, thank you for like pushing us to do better, and like thank you for like not to be this person, but there's so many people that are so privileged in our community, and now that there's kind of like someone under us to be like shaking things up, I think it allows for change. And even for me, who I feel is like pretty knowledgeable about equity and inclusion works, I'm like, oh, like we could work on that.
Yeah.
And I think like we just had student government elections, and I talked to the candidates, and especially the ones that ended up winning, Hannah and Nivea, and I had this conversation with them of like, you know, if you win, can we sit in Senate meetings, and I want to have conversations with Abolish Greek Life people, and I want to know what we can do better.
Yeah, I think like, I don't know, I think just the, like, specifically talking about the United States, just the way it's built, Greek life isn't like, oh, like, racism only exists here. And I think with a lot of, like, looking on a bigger countrywide level, if you get rid of Greek life, like, that can help, like, that aspect of things. But I think the bigger thing would be just to reform, because there are other institutions that you can't get rid of. And I think, especially with people in universities being those future leaders, if we can reform specifically as a community, which is something that we've been trying to do, not just like Panhell community, but listening to wider USC discourse around Greek life.
Yeah, and I really agree with that, because I think what people don't understand is like there's always going to be these super racist privileged people, and maybe like Greek life has historically had a disproportionate like amount of them, but like we're forcing a good amount of people to have to listen to these conversations, like maybe change their mind. And like I think that that's a conversation we had as like DEI chairs. And like I remember when Lawrence Ross, who's like a very like famous author and like talks about a lot of DEI with like Greek life and like different institutions at the university level, talked to us and was like, yeah, a lot of people aren't gonna understand, but if you're force them to have the conversation, they're always gonna remember it.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of people don't understand, like in some ways like this is good because we're changing the system. And like sometimes I feel kind of like an infiltrator of like I couldn't have been here like 30 years ago, and now I'm here and I'm like changing people's minds. So having those like equity conversations and then forcing people to have them even if they don't want to, because like DI is, every member is gonna have to hear about like DI. Like we just had a chapter meeting on Monday where our DI chair gave a presentation about Black History Month.
I want to touch on this, but do you believe we're actually making change?
If we hadn't changed, I wouldn't be here anymore. Obviously it's a little different coming from the person who was leading the equity work last year, but I do think that I have seen a lot of systematic changes, and like people who would have never thought about the words diversity, equity, inclusion starting to think about them. I see just a lot of executive board members who you can tell come from so much privilege, are like white, are extremely upper class, and you would have never expected the word CEI to come out of their mouth, or for them to be like we need to create more inclusive spaces, and we need to make sure that we're bringing in people of color, and we need to make sure that we're bringing like different economic statuses. So I think I've seen a lot more diversity, but we have this conversation a lot of diversity doesn't matter as much as equity and inclusion, because you can't bring in people of color if you're not creating equal space for them. And do I think we have an equitable and inclusive space for them yet? No. But do I think we have a more equitable and inclusive space for them than we had 2 years ago? Yes. And the biggest way we've done that is through actual documentation. So whether that be our bylaws, which are like a complex set of 60 pages of rules, or our diversity, equity, inclusion plan, which is 15 pages, which has deadlines that every single chapter should be meeting. Do they always meet them? Unfortunately not, but we are pushing them to do that. We just we just changed our bylaws to be more gender inclusive. So now anybody that identifies as a woman can go through recruitment. And so this is going to outlive us, because these are living documents that we revise every single semester. And that's been my biggest thing. If it's not written into, I'm pre-law, so if it's not written into the laws, it's not going to exist. So that's been probably my biggest initiative.
And if there was one or two sentences that could describe a healthier Greek life to each one of you, what would that be?
I would say really just being open to communication.
I would say just being more aware of the privilege you have, and being open to having really difficult conversations and learning from those conversations instead of getting defensive.
Yeah, taking the feedback.
I agree.
Thank you both so much for being here. This was amazing. I had such a great time talking with you guys.
On behalf of our team, we want to thank you for listening with open ears and an open heart. We urge you to continue to discuss these issues and work together as a community to create a dialogue that progresses us forward. Thank you to our producers, Jackson Kroof and Christy Taiwo Makanjola, our post-media manager, Vince Gonzalez, our composer, Joel Jimenez, and last but certainly not least, our guests. Please like and subscribe. Fight on.